This is Matthew Kratter's Bitcoin University. Today I want to talk about Trump, RFK Jr., and Bitcoin. In particular, the two speeches from the Nashville Bitcoin Conference. Trump's speech, which I'll link to in the description notes below, as well as RFK Jr.'s keynote at the same conference. Now, some necessary background. I actually don't hate Trump. I think he displayed enormous courage and presence of mind after the assassination attempt. Over the years, I've also enjoyed seeing Trump trash some loathsome DC insiders like Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton and Elizabeth Warren in speeches and in the debates. So I'm not a never Trumper or someone suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. In fact, I actually voted for Trump against that bloodthirsty demon warmonger Hillary in 2016. That's all the context for the negative things I'm about to say against Trump right now. But here's the truth. I think that Trump's speech at the Nashville Bitcoin Conference was absolutely terrible. It was rambling. It seemed like he was just going through the motions. It was very lukewarm and very low energy, except when he spoke about himself. It seemed like just another campaign stop. He kept conflating Bitcoin and crypto. He seems to think that Bitcoin is an industry like oil and gas that really needs him for some reason. He briefly mentioned what was supposed to be the pinnacle of the whole announcement. He briefly mentioned a Bitcoin strategic reserve, but he never even mentioned how much Bitcoin it would be buying. It didn't seem to be a central part of his speech. And then here's the really weird part. Trump never mentioned whether he personally actually owns any Bitcoin, which is really weird when you think about it, because if he does own some, it'd be really nice to hear about it and would give him some credibility. This seems like an obvious thing. If you're going to push an asset, maybe you should own some of it and have some skin in the game. Trump then took credit for Bitcoin surging 3,900% while he was in office, but only 50% under Biden. I'm not sure that's something to be bragging about to the extent that Bitcoin tracks U.S. monetary debasement. It's not like Trump supported Bitcoin when he was in office. In fact, he attacked it repeatedly and told Mnuchin to shut it down, which is obviously impossible and betrays Trump's understanding of Bitcoin, at least in 2020. Trump also appears to have no understanding of how government deficits work and how they play into inflation. You simply cannot cut taxes, start a new war with Iran, as both J.D. Vance and Trump seem to want to do, run huge budget deficits that are monetized by the Fed, and then expect inflation to go down. We can't even afford government spending today, not to mention a further tax cut, which I would definitely be in favor of, or another war with Iran, which I would definitely not be in favor of. I don't think Trump has a clue about how this actually works, the relationship between monetizing deficits and inflation. Later in his speech, Trump asserted that Bitcoin is not a threat to the US dollar, which I don't think is also not true. Bitcoin really is the ultimate threat to the US dollar. Now, maybe he's playing 5D chess here because you wouldn't want a future president and a past president to be saying that he wants to destroy the dollar. But I thought it's kind of misleading to say that. And then I thought that Trump's final message, if you listen to the whole speech, as I did, his final message was condescending and demonstrated that he doesn't really consider himself part of the Bitcoin community, but rather an external observer. What he said at the end was, have a good time with your Bitcoin and your crypto and everything else you're playing with. And note that he says your Bitcoin, not our Bitcoin. I thought that was very interesting. So those are all the negatives that come to mind after watching it. You can watch the whole speech. I found it incredibly painful, even as a sometime fan of Trump's speeches. Now, the pros were Trump just being at a Bitcoin conference is obviously pretty amazing. So congratulations to David Bailey for making this happen, also for making it happen that RFK Jr. was there another time. Trump is the first American president ever to attend a Bitcoin conference, as far as I can tell. At minimum, Trump understands that the smart political move is to be in favor of Bitcoin rather than against it. And I think that this is something that the Democrats are going to have to figure out soon if they want to survive as a party in the coming years. Trump also said in his speech, another pro is that he said he'll defend self-custody. Self-custody, of course, is just the right to hold stuff that belongs to you. This should be protected, at least under the U.S. Constitution, but it is nice to have a president who says this. He said he would stop Elizabeth Warren and her goons from attacking Bitcoin, which would definitely be welcome. Trump promised to fire Gary Gensler on day one, and this got quite a few cheers from the audience. It looked like it surprised Trump himself. I think that's fine, but Gary Gensler really has never been an enemy of Bitcoin. He's really only attacked crypto. He did delay the Bitcoin ETF, which may or may not be that great for Bitcoin at the end of the day, but he was much more of a foe of crypto, and maybe a lot of people who attended this Nashville conference were more on the crypto side of things than the Bitcoin side of things. Trump also promised, another positive was he promised that no CBDC would be rolled out on his watch, but then he went on to praise stablecoins, which could end up being worse. You could have the equivalent of CBDC just run by private companies, run by Silicon Valley, or run by Tether or something like this. And so that is another problem, a president pushing the US dollar. Trump came out strongly in support of hydrocarbons and nuclear energy. There's a pretty funny part of the speech where he said, we're going to be creating so much electricity that you'll be saying, please, please, President, we don't want any more electricity. We can't stand it. You'll be begging me, no more electricity, sir. This is a welcome change from the current administration that seems to think that you can have a high-functioning civilization by decreasing energy usage, which is the complete opposite of how it actually works. Trump also said that he'll pardon Ross Ulbricht, which I'm strongly in favor of. So these were all good points, but delivered in a very rambling way with lots of digressions and lots of self-praise and the typical Trump style, which can be funny, can also get a little tiresome at times. It's really too bad, though, that it wasn't a better speech, because this speech could have been one for the ages. If you're finding this video helpful so far, I just ask you to help to support the channel. Click the subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment, question, suggestion for a future video. Share this video with a friend or family member, and then the monetary ways you can contribute, leave a super thanks, leave a thanks or a tip, and also you can join the channel for $2.99 a month or $4.99 a month. You get some extra emojis and some extra videos as well. By contrast with Trump's speech, RFK Jr. gave the speech that I think Trump should have given if his handlers had been on top of this, and if Trump were a serious Bitcoiner who's a little further down the rabbit hole. RFK Jr. promised the following executive orders on day one of his presidency, and I have to say I was absolutely blown away by what he is suggesting. Number one, Department of Justice and U.S. Marshal will stop selling off the U.S.'s 200,000 Bitcoin that they already have in possession and will instead move them into a Bitcoin strategic reserve. More on that in a moment. Number two, executive order, U.S. Treasury will purchase 550 Bitcoin daily to add to this Bitcoin strategic reserve until it contains 4 million Bitcoin. I think that's a delusional number, but it would be cool. It's cool to dream about. The reason he picked that number, the U.S. owns about 19% of the world's gold inventories, above ground gold inventories. So this would be about 4 million Bitcoin would be about 19% of Bitcoin's maximum supply of 21 million. But 550 Bitcoin is a lot. That's 100 Bitcoin more than are being mined every day now. Every day there are only about 450 Bitcoin mined. So more on this, like how is he actually going to purchase these? Where's the money going to come from to buy these? That's another problem. But let's stay with the positives. This I thought was the most positive thing. Zero capital gains tax when you sell your Bitcoin for US dollars. That is huge. Bitcoin is indeed money too. When I spend US dollars, I don't get taxed. And so I shouldn't be taxed when I spend Bitcoin or convert it to fiat. I think this is a great thing. This is probably the thing that's probably most exciting for many of us, paired with zero reporting of Bitcoin transactions to the U.S. government. This is huge and will really help Bitcoin to take off in the U.S. and globally as a medium of exchange. Next executive order, allow 1031 exchanges, i.e. tax-deferred exchanges, where you could take your Bitcoin, you could use it to purchase a property, and there would be no tax on your Bitcoin. This is part and parcel of having no cap gains taxes on Bitcoin, I believe, but this will definitely excite people who want to use their Bitcoin to buy a house or a ranch or some real estate in the U.S. Number six, RFK Jr. promised to protect the right to self-custody, just like Trump did, and also the right to run Bitcoin nodes. And I'd bet you 10 million sats that Trump couldn't tell you what a Bitcoin node even does. I'm sure he has no idea. Number seven, from RFK Jr., he vowed to pardon Ross Ulbricht, Assange, and Snowden on day one of his presidency. I'm not sure Assange still needs that pardon. As I understand it, he's already in Australia. He's been released, but this was part of the promise, and I think it's a good thing. I support all of this. Also, number eight, RFK may appoint Michael Saylor or Caitlin Long as Treasury Secretary. I think either of them would be fantastic candidates. Compare that to Trump floating Jamie Dimon for the role or the post a couple weeks ago. Another thing about RFK Jr., he's the only major candidate who's explicitly anti-central banker and anti-CIA, just like his father and his uncle. And I think it's a really courageous stance to take, and one that can certainly get you murdered as well. In his speech, RFK Jr. demonstrated a deep understanding of how fiat money printing has led to forever wars, wealth inequality, and class warfare, as well as how Bitcoin can fix all of this and what it means to have transactional freedom in addition to freedom of speech. And he referenced the Canadian truckers as part of this. RFK Jr. also disclosed that he now has most of his net worth in Bitcoin, including the big chunk that he bought with proceeds from his fees in the Monsanto case. That's at minute 16 in the video, which I'll link to in the description notes below. You can hear him say that. In sum, RFK Jr.'s speech is a masterclass in how the fiat economy really works, how it funds the war machine, and how Bitcoin can help to defund this war machine and change things. By contrast, I feel like Trump's speech sounded like just another campaign stump speech, unfortunately. So this leads to a couple of questions. What would it mean to vote for RFK Jr. at this point as a Bitcoiner, since it is still quite difficult to see how he can win even a single state's electoral votes, much less the whole electoral college? Would such a vote be a protest vote against the uniparty, the blues and the reds, who share a lot of the same characteristics? Or is it just a dumb move that will help Kamala win by taking a vote away from Trump? Is it a way of signaling to other politicians what kind of platform Bitcoiners really like and would be willing to support in future elections? It's hard for me to imagine a Bitcoiner who would not be on board with most of RFK Jr.'s proposals. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and do please keep it civil and polite as we try to figure out these things together. One thing we can say for sure is that people who've been saying that the US would ban Bitcoin have been quite wrong and will continue to be quite wrong. And I think even the Democrats may be waking up to the electoral threat of this. Democratic politicians have written a letter to the DNC asking the party to pivot away from the anti-Bitcoin policies of Elizabeth Warren. This is likely in response to polling data, the GOP pro-Bitcoin policies, and President Trump speaking at the Bitcoin conference, as Pierre Rochard points out here. Now, Trump did not describe the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve in any detail in his speech, but right afterwards, Senator Cynthia Lummis announced a bill that would establish, this is a quote, establish a decentralized network of secure Bitcoin vaults operated by the United States Department of Treasury and seek to acquire 1 million total Bitcoin to hold. Are Trump and Lummis planning to work together on this? If so, the coordination was never explicitly announced as far as I can tell. Here's the official announcement from the Lummis Senate website. Lummis announces revolutionary proposal to supercharge the dollar, bolster U.S. economy. Today, during Bitcoin 2024, U.S. Senator Cynthia Lummis from Wyoming announced a revolutionary proposal to supercharge the U.S. dollar by establishing a strategic Bitcoin reserve to fortify the dollar against rising inflation and cement U.S. leadership in the rapidly evolving global financial system. I think that's great. I agree with some of it, but I'm actually not that interested in supercharging the U.S. dollar. I'd actually be quite happy to see the U.S. dollar die a fast and ignominious death, as it probably deserves. So why exactly, this is the part I don't understand, why exactly should the U.S. set up a Bitcoin strategic reserve? Will it be like the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve that Biden emptied in order to keep gas prices low and help the midterm elections a couple years ago? Will owning a lot of Bitcoin suddenly make the U.S. a benevolent actor on the world stage instead of the world's biggest terrorist organization? Or maybe it just makes sense to have the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve to help to stave off a disorderly sell-off in the dollar and ease the transition to a Bitcoin standard. I don't have any answers here. I'm asking more questions. But it does seem to me like the U.S. government buying this much Bitcoin, whether it's 1 million Bitcoin or 4 million Bitcoin, would pretty much end the dollar system on the spot once the market began to price in so much buying. In other words, Bitcoin would rapidly go to the moon and the US dollar would go to the toilet quite quickly. And most importantly, as I alluded to before, where in the world is the US government going to get the money to buy so much Bitcoin, 1 million Bitcoin or 4 million Bitcoin, under either the Trump-Lummis plan or the RFK Jr. plan? And why is no one addressing this? Is the Fed just going to print it all? If they do, they're going to destroy the dollar in the process, and Bitcoin's going to be a runaway train. They won't be able to accumulate as much Bitcoin as they want to in the process. Can the president, can the Congress really get the Fed to do this, force them to print fiat to buy Bitcoin, especially when we're running such huge deficits already? Will central bankers at the Fed and elsewhere cooperate to engineer their own demise? It's hard to see exactly how that would play out. So is Trump a real Bitcoiner now? Has he been orange-pilled? I would say I seriously doubt it. Even in just the last 2 weeks, Trump keeps sticking his foot in his mouth. First of all, talking about Jamie Dimon for Treasury Secretary, also talking about how El Salvador's President Bukele is so bad. If you've supposedly been orange-pilled, why in the world would you ever float the idea of Jeffrey Epstein's banker for anything much less Treasury Secretary. Trump seems completely oblivious to the fact that this is extremely offensive to Bitcoiners. And this is not fake news, as some of you have been saying. This is from the Bloomberg interview with Trump. Trump saying, I have a lot of respect for Jamie Dimon, a future Trump Treasury Secretary. He is somebody I would consider for sure. Now, he has since then walked back these comments because he received a lot of pushback from Bitcoiners. But the fact that people are saying he's been orange-pilled and that he wants to stick Jamie Dimon in there, again, this is rehiring the swamp like he did with all the Goldman Sachs people in his first term. As a Bitcoiner, it really comes down to Trump versus Kennedy in my mind. The Democrats aren't even playing in this field yet. Kamala did not come to the Bitcoin conference, though she did receive an invitation. So the question is Trump versus Kennedy. If you want to play the vote harder game and you care about these sort of politics, do you vote for a candidate who has a much better understanding of Bitcoin, like RFK Jr., or do you vote for a candidate who has a much better chance of winning, like Donald Trump? I'll leave that up to you. Voting for president is important, but it's much less important in my mind than voting and being active at a local level. I've talked about this before, focusing on your family and community first, building free and open source tools that can route around the current system and totalitarianism like Bitcoin and Nostr can do. We already have the power if we're willing to use it. We no longer need to ask permission from the government. We can vote with our money by dumping our fiat for Bitcoin. We can also gradually transition away from centralized platforms like X, Twitter, and YouTube to decentralized platforms like Nostr. And you can find all my videos on Nostr even today. I'll put a link in the description notes below. You can see my NPub up here, and you can view videos there as well if I'm ever deplatformed from the other platforms. Here's another speech in conclusion from the Nashville conference that is well worth watching. This was Michael Saylor's keynote speech, which was quite excellent and a good synthesis of many ideas that he's presented elsewhere. And his price targets make me look like a Bitcoin bear, saying that Bitcoin's going to $1 million. He has a couple different cases here. He has the bear case, the base case, and the bull case. The base case is $13 million by 2045. He's basically looking 21 years in the future using that magic number 21. Base case would be $13 million per Bitcoin. That would give Bitcoin a market cap of 280 trillion. Bear case would just be a meager $3 million per coin, and the bull case would be $49 million per coin, in which case you can see the annual realized returns, 21%, 29%, and 37%, none of which are unreasonable considering that Bitcoin has been going up on average more like 50% or 100% a year for years and years. Having a $68 trillion market cap is also quite reasonable. This base case market cap is on the order of bonds or global real estate, etc. So these numbers are quite realistic. You're not hearing them from me, but you're hearing them from a very successful billionaire who called the mobile wave correctly. He called all the FANG stocks very early on, and now he's definitely been ahead of the game with Bitcoin as well. So the next time your friend tells you that Bitcoin's too expensive at $67,000 or wherever it is right now, you can keep these targets in mind and realize that Bitcoin, if it wins, is going to take a tremendous market share from global assets. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.